Coco.
Chief Brody.
Coco.
Chief Brody. Tell me no.
Coco.
Yeah.
Tell him yes. Coco. Look that up. Coco.
Yeah.
Oh my god. I can see it. Give the neck taps.
Okay. This is a push rod operated motor because a lot of motors are overhead cams. On these motorcycles, our cams are down here in the cam chest, and you have push rods, and then you have these are your rocker arms. Okay, these are your push rods. Your camshaft is behind this plate here, and I can show you that afterwards. As the motor spins, the chain spins, the cam spins, your push rods will go up and down, and that's what opens and closes your valves via the rocker arms. I mean, I can show you, you'll see that push rod right now is opening, pushing up, and it's opening that valve back here. And then now it's going down, and the valve's closing, and then now that one's opening and closing. Okay, so that's the basic concept between push rod operated motor. Do you know what position the motor's supposed to be in?
No.
If you're at top dead center compression, all your valves are closed, so you have no pressure pushing up on your rocker arm shafts. If your camshaft is pushing up and trying to open up a valve, and you're trying to take this off, there's heavy pressure on that shaft. So putting it on top dead center compression just relieves all that pressure and alleviates you from breaking stuff.
Good.
But we'll break other things in other ways, so don't worry about it. You have two push rods, intake and exhaust. This little doohickey right here is your chain tensioner. It just puts tension on this chain, and it's controlled by oil pressure. So as oil passes through, it pushes on that piston and keeps tension on that chain. Otherwise it'll just kind of slap around, make a lot of noise, and you could actually lose cam timing. You see that, you can see that little hole. Oil enters into that passage and just puts pressure on that piston and pushes out that little pad and puts tension on that chain. Wiki. Removal only. This is called your pinion shaft. Once I get this plate off, you'll be able to see it a little bit better. But that's actually connected to your flywheels inside the motor. So this is actually connected to your motor. As this spins, you can see it spinning there. This is your camshaft. The camshaft isn't spinning now because I don't have the sprockets and chains connected. So that's what these are for. It's to connect your pinion shaft to your camshaft. So as the motor spins, it spins the cams, push rods up and down, and then your valves open and close. And this is called your cam plate. And behind here, we're going to find the cam shaft, and your oil pump sits back there. This passage right here is connected to the oil pan, okay? As this rotates, it draws oil through this passage, through this hole that sits like that, okay? And then basically oil just gets drawn in and then passed throughout the motor via ports that are, machined into this cam plate. So this cam plate is pretty integral, it's not just a plate. These gears are what feed the motor oil. On the back side of this oil pump, so you have the front side, the feed side, okay? And then the back side, we call this the scavenge side or the return side. A typical term that you guys probably hear is sumping, okay? Sumping is when too much oil builds up in the crankcase. You want most of your oil to return back to the pan. There's always going to be some oil in the crankcase, the bottom of the the bottom of the motor. But if you get too much, the flywheels have to fight through that oil. It creates drag and it slows the motor down. There's also drain ports that drain engine oil into the cam compartment here. Okay. This is your flywheel bearing right there. If your oil gets up to this level, it'll easily pass through those holes right there through the bearing, okay? And that'll cause oversumping, you know, because then you have too much oil transfer, okay? What Harley's done is they added this little seal, and most aftermarket companies are doing the same thing. S&S and Fueling, they have you reusing this seal, but what the seal does, it blocks off this little bearing there, and it stops the oil from transferring from the cam compartment over into the crankcase. This is your camshaft. This is called your lifter or your tappet, whatever you prefer. This little oil port here, and then there. That's how it's going to be sitting. So oil is going to enter through your lifter, come out through the top there, come up through your push rod and up to the top of your motor. So we'll get a closer look in a minute, but you can start to see here now, you can see your valves and your valve springs. Yeah. Pretty cool. This is the cylinder head.
What's up, everybody?
We're switching over to G.
Haven't done anything but disassemble this motor, and we're going to start fresh.
Aren't you kind of pissed at Jay for kind of just running through the last one?
Nah, it happens. You got to be on your toes with him.
He's not even texting me. He's usually texting me.
This is the new S&S oil pump that we are installing on these bikes. So it's funny, that little groove right there, nowhere in the instructions does it tell you that you're supposed to take the seal off the Harley-Davidson plaque, the back plate of the oil pump, and stick it onto here.
You just assumed?
That's what they say. Yeah, they say since you see that, you're supposed to automatically know that that's what's supposed to happen.
Is there a story behind that? Did you do that one time?
Yes. So the first one that I built, this is the new version. So the old version did not have this, and it still went in a Milwaukee-Eight. So this is the first one that I installed. I installed it with no instruction, no direction of how to actually remove the seal and put it in here. So I installed it and the bike sumped. Came back like 200 miles and it was sumping.
So whose fault is it really?
Well, I take partial blame for it. I always will because I did it. Along with that oil pump is this fancy thing. This is the cam plate from S&S. Badass, isn't it?
That's sweet.
All these nice, huge oil passages and big areas for oil to flow through. Yeah, it's pretty clean. What would really look cool is if this cover was clear. Yeah. Because then you would see that in there like that. That's the cam.
Camshaft.
Why is it all juicy?
More cam.
That's like great.
Lubrication.
He just pulled it out of his head.
Whenever I install the oil pump to the backing plate with the cam, you're supposed to rotate the motor as you torque these bolts down. So it kind of finds a natural happy home. It's not lifted off to one side and doesn't cause any unnecessary wear on opposite sides or any side of the inside of the oil pump. So I rotate it like that. This is where you're supposed to assemble the rear cylinder first, on top dead center on the rear cylinder. So I would essentially assemble it all the way both, but I would set my push rods first on the rear cylinder. About right there. Now, tie my oil pump down. One of the procedures that Harley recommends is to make sure that these two sprockets are lined up square. like that. You don't want to be taller or shorter than each other, so they want to line up square when you install them into the motor. Got me?
Yeah.
So what I'm going to do is take that back off, and the spacer goes on, just like that, and then your sprockets go on. If you ever bring your bike to Harley, make sure you don't ask for him to work on your bike.
Dude, I think you're a little off. Not in here, but in here.
It's stupid. This is the cam sprocket. It's got a dot on it. See that? This is the flywheel sprocket. It also has a dot on it. When you put these together, you want to make sure that those dots are lined up. Now those lined up, so that would be considered one tooth off. All right? So then what I do, take it, go one tooth. Oh. Like that. Do you call that lined up?
Oh yeah.
Does it look even on both sides?
It's nice and lined up.
Perfect. So that's the cam timing to the flywheel. So my cam compartment is essentially done. I'm going to move on to the lifters and the lifter blocks. And then after that, we're going to do the cylinders and heads. But there is a process to the heads, because I'm changing springs out. So the point to this is I'm trying to remove all the air out of the lifter. Any air in there is not going to give me a proper adjustment when I go to do my push rod adjustment. So if there's hydraulic fluid in it, or oil, it's going to be an easier process. A lot of people will take the lifter, take an oil can and squirt oil through the bottom of the lifter as a whole. That's how oil comes through the lifter. They squirt till they get oil to the top. But it's a messy job, it's dirty. I don't personally like it. So I designed this thing off of a Jim's tool that I saw a long time ago. So that's sucking all the air out of the lifters and filling it with oil. Now back off, do it again. If you don't remove all the air out of the lifter before you fire it up, or before you install them, the motor will clatter. It'll clatter for a few minutes and it'll sound like it's coming apart until the lifters bleed up. It's not a good sign. Okay, so those are grooves on the back of the valve stem, right? This little guy is called the keeper. See, it's got the little grooves on it? Mm-hmm. Okay, so that locks into the back of the valve stem grooves. And then once it goes up, once I let go of the spring pressure, it's got this little guy. And that is concaved to fit the valve spring keepers. So once this goes up, it locks them around the valve stem like that, holds them so they can't pop out. See how I installed the spacers in there? See the little blue washers that are underneath the valve springs? Those are the spacers that add lift, add spring pressure to my springs. Well, the first step is to torque it down to 35 foot-pounds. and then I loosen everything, back it off, full turn, and then I torque it the way it's supposed to be torqued. The correct torque sequence. This is the lower rocker box cover. All I'm doing now is putting the gasket in. So these are the rockers that are being installed now. Normally, you would see me put push rods in before I install these. But today, I have adjustable push rods. So it is not necessary. Now that I got the top end, all I got left to do is put my induction module on and a few other things, and it's all ready to go. So I'm pretty much done here.
Can't wait to start it up.